What's up guys, welcome back to my channel Anime Fiction. I'm back with a new episode of What If Naruto Was Reincarnated as a Hollow with his system part 1. And if you did enjoy this video, consider a like, and if you're new to my channel and like more content, subscribe and hit that notification bell for more crossover fictions. Now let's begin this new video.
Chapter 1. A new Hollow is born. Naruto had just completed his Hokage training and was raring to go. He went camping with a few close buddies to celebrate. Unfortunately, they did not anticipate the outcome. The gang was assaulted by a wild super tiger with chakra from the 10 tails, and Naruto, in an unexpected display of bravery, fought to save one of his comrades who had been captured. He saved his comrade, but at the expense of his own life, as he was slowly mauled alive. Fortunately, the discomfort was short-lived due to the adrenaline and blood loss. He perished because the tiger had a small amount of the 10 tails power, which poisoned Naruto and prevented him from healing himself with the 9 tails strength. There was no tunnel with a dazzling light when Naruto died. When he regained consciousness, there were no heavenly gates and, mercifully, no burning pits. It was difficult to maintain, but all he noticed was darkness, despite the fact that it was warm and comfortable. For who knows how long, he would fade in and out of consciousness. Was it a matter of days or years? Nobody knows. Finally, it appears like there was a light at the end of the tunnel, but it wasn't heaven that awaited him. It appears that I was reincarnated. But where was God? What about my abilities? Why didn't I receive a system? I'd want to speak with the management, he reflected to himself. There was a doctor who appeared to be a fully normal human being. There is no peculiar hair, eye color, or ear shape. There are no sharp teeth. It appeared to be a perfectly regular human being. That's the end of Isekai. He does, however, appear Asian. Is it true that I'm Asian this time? Despite his disappointment, he was interested about his new existence. The man said some phrases he didn't understand, but as a former closet weeb, he recognized them as Japanese. Definitely still Japanese this time, and it appears to be Earth. It's such a pity. I was hoping for some great magical abilities here, but I didn't meet any gods or anything. Finally, he was able to see his mother and confirm that he was Japanese in this incarnation. Well, at least half Japanese, because he had yet to see someone he was certain was his father. Fortunately, his mother appeared to be kind and attractive. Nobody wants to be ugly, so perhaps his father was gorgeous as well. Unfortunately, he didn't inherit any kind of translation ability or innate language, so he couldn't grasp what they were saying save for a few common words. He wasn't even close to understanding a single sentence. He made an effort to make a good impression on his mother by smiling and laughing at her. He didn't want to start his new life with a mother suffering from postpartum depression, therefore making sure his mother was happy was his top priority. Finally, what he thought was his father arrived in a hurry, and happily, he appears to be above average in the looks department. But it's difficult to say for certain. He is so used to Western faces and beauty standards that it is difficult to discern how gorgeous he is by Japanese beauty standards. Despite the fact that he is certain his mother is beautiful. Also, he is now certain that he is 100% Japanese this time. I'm delighted we were able to resolve the issue. It doesn't take him long to realize that his name appears to be Naruto in this world as well, as both parents have said it to him several times when he was a baby. He becomes really fatigued after a time. Even if he was reborn, he appears to be limited to his fragile newborn body, which is prone to weariness. Learning a new language has been difficult for him, but as a baby, he has little else to do, and with his memories from his previous life, he has a leg up, managing to begin speaking not only simple words, but simple sentences by the time he is 1 year old. He has also learned that, aside from not receiving any powers, systems, or anything unusual as a result of his reincarnation, he was born into a relatively affluent family with both parents being above average in looks, which means he definitely has a financial advantage over most and will most likely have an advantage in looks as well in the future. Neither of which can be overstated in terms of value, especially given that we live on Earth. His parents were both affectionate, though he wished his father was home more often, though he knew this wasn't unusual in Japan. He'd also discovered his complete name. In this planet, his family name was also Uzumaki, hence he was known as Naruto Uzumaki. But there is one exception. He notices no smartphones. There is a television, but it appears to be one of those ancient tube televisions. At first, he believed his family was archaic, but a few years later, a computer was introduced, which also appeared archaic, but his parents were ecstatic about it. His mother became pregnant again a few years after he started school. He became a big brother to little Mito this time because she had a girl. She was somewhat hesitant, but Naruto's maturity made it easy for her to become attached to him, as he made sure to be a fun yet responsible and loyal big brother. Meanwhile, due to his prior life knowledge and maturity, he did well enough to start school early and even skip years on occasion. He had previously planned a life path for him to be able to go through all of the dull schoolwork and start life sooner this time around, rather than having to wait 23 years. He may not have gotten anything exceptional out of his reincarnation, but his education and sophisticated thinking gave him an advantage in accelerating through school, attending a premier college, and graduating before the age of 20. He even made a point of concentrating on IT and programming, knowing how important computers will be by the time he graduated. Naruto worked hard and was accepted into a prestigious college by the age of 14. Was it difficult going to class with kids who were many years older? Sure. Was it truly simpler for him to attend to school with kids his own age when he was well into his 20s? Not at all. Despite the fact that he didn't have many friends because of the age gap, he had lots of Onisamas. Because he was so cute and much younger than his female peers, he was treated more like a cute little brother than a regular male classmate. Unfortunately, this also meant that he didn't have many male classmates. Skipping years meant abandoning old classmates and having to rebuild new relationships in each new class. Meanwhile, at home, he made an effort to assist around the house and with his younger sister in order to relieve some of the strain on his parents. They had grown accustomed to his maturity, so while he still had to appear like a child, the "genius kid" title enabled him get away with behaving a few years older than he was without anyone being suspicious of him. His parents were exceedingly proud of him, and his sister had developed a small brother complex for the brother who always looked after her when their parents couldn't. The main disappointment was that although being intellectually above 30 and physically gorgeous with glossy ink black mid-length hair, smooth fair complexion, eyes like an abyss you could sink in, good facial features, and being in shape, there were no love relationships. The females his physical age were much too immature for him to ever contemplate, and the slightly more mature students in his classes never saw him as anything more than a cute little brother to bring around and cuddle in purely platonic ways. Since romantic relationships were a dead end for the time being, he spent most of his spare time outside of school practicing kendo and iaido from a young age, reasoning that since he was born in Japan, he should at least practice something unique to his country of birth, and even better if it can help him protect himself. Fortunately, Japan is an extremely secure country, and they lived in a relatively prosperous neighborhood, so despite preparing for over 14 years, he has never had to use any of it. As he began college, he made a point of selecting brand new programming classes for his electives and studying even more on this outside of his usual coursework to the point that he was beginning to build out some of his future ideas. He was already aware of the dot-com bubble and hoped to make a lot of money by capitalizing on his knowledge of where things were headed so that by the time he graduated from college, he would have completed enough work to launch cutting-edge software that he knew would be a market success. This time, it won't be Bill Gates and Steve Jobs. It would be Naruto Uzumaki, a name that will become synonymous with technological leadership around the world. He was now 16 years old and in his second year of college. Just 2 more years and he could graduate and finish the last of his code that would usher the world into a new age of computing by introducing a graphical Windows interface-based operating system along with a business suite that would tempt just about any business over a year before Microsoft released its first version of Windows or Apple's Lisa OS caught on. He had just finished his kendo practice and was on his way home at night when the hair on the back of his neck stood on edge for no apparent reason and a shudder ran up his spine. Suddenly, he heard a roar similar to the T-Rex from Jurassic Park. He swiftly grabbed his Bakken from his training kit and held it in a defensive stance, ready to respond, not knowing what was going on. "Who's there? This isn't funny," he exclaimed, thinking that it was all a joke. He felt a tremendous amount of pain in his abdomen before he recognized what had happened. When he peered down, all he saw was a huge hole in his stomach, yet as if phasing in and out of existence, he noticed some kinda black blade protruding out of the front of his stomach. Son of a bitch, not again, he begged himself before the blade pivoted and slashed out of the side of his stomach, leaving a gaping wound that was certain to be fatal. When he saw something he wasn't expecting, he fought to turn around. It was a somewhat humanoid monster, but its entire body was black, but for a dazzling white facial mask. It had horns and gigantic swords instead of hands on its forearms, one of which had just nearly chopped him in half. Doesn't that look like white? I got totally duped. You sent me to Bleach with no abilities. I absolutely need to talk to that damned manager right now. He yelled in his head as he collapsed to the ground, bleeding out, exactly like he had in his previous existence. So much for living a long life this time. This isn't fair, he thought as he became increasingly dizzy. Then he noticed White sprinting away, only to notice a big person in Shiakusho and a white Haori. Isn't that Isshin? Shit. His thoughts were slowing as he continued to bleed out, but no one appeared to notice because there were no humans and the Shinigami were more concentrated on hunting White. Not only do I reincarnate without any special abilities, but it turns out it's the world of Bleach, and now I can't even become a Fullbringer, Quincy, or Shinigami. He prayed desperately. A peculiar severe burning feeling slowly spread from his abdomen. Is this the poison of hollowification? Is that all there is to it? To become a mindless hollow susceptible to being absorbed by others? No. In frustration, he glanced up at the starry sky. Initializing. Status. Dying. Hollowification underway. Action. Avoid hollowification. Error. Failure. Third attempt. Failure. Third attempt. Failure. Action halted. Action. Maintaining awareness. Success. Consciousness strengthened. Anchoring consciousness. Initialization of the hollow system. Consciousness is incapable of dealing with hollowification. The consciousness goes into forced hibernation. What? Those were Naruto's final thoughts before his consciousness was devoured by an infinite void. He was unable to feel anything. He didn't have a pulse, no breath, and no heartbeat. There was no sound. There was nothing to see but blackness. He didn't feel like he had a body at all. What am I doing? What exactly am I? Who am I? He could only continue to question himself and his circumstances for what seemed like an eternity. The only respite was sleep, which he got plenty of. He started getting a headache after who knows how long. Normally, he'd be annoyed, but this was the first thing he'd felt in a long time, and anything was preferable to the nothingness of all things that had been his existence. He was surprised to hear something. That's new, he remarked. Action. Consciousness integration. Suddenly, his headache became much worse, yet his mind began to clear from the cloud it had been in. Integration of consciousness. Action. Creating a spirit body. In his body, a scorching sensation began. Wait a minute, body, he reflected to himself. He couldn't put his finger on it, but he felt like he was maturing. Nothing else made any sense. Spirit body formed successfully. Action. Memory stimulation. That's correct. Naruto Uzumaki here. He could now recall who he was and how he died. For the second time. No. What about my intentions? Everything in my future was amazing. What about my computer's operating system? It was almost finished. He yelled in his head, unable to comprehend that all of his ambitions and efforts over the previous 16 years had been entirely thwarted by one tragic accident. Simply put, he was in the wrong place at the wrong time. Again. Wait. Why am I still awake? Did I not get hollowified? He was perplexed. Answer. Despite hollowification, the hollow system preserved the host's awareness. What exactly happened? He inquired. Answer. To allow for integration of the changing body and awareness without losing the host's self, the system halted the hollowification process and drove the host's consciousness into hibernation. So you're saying I still turned into a hollow? He went on. Correct answer. Can I still become a Shinigami in the meantime? He begged frantically. Answer. Improbable. How about Vizard? He was now grabbing at straws. Answer. Improbable. So I'm stuck as a hollow, he grumbled. Correct answer. That wasn't a question, he said sarcastically. He gently opens his eyes and notices that he is still in the same park he was in before, but there are some differences. Some things have vanished, while others have been replaced, and those that remain appear to be in worse condition. How long did I spend in hibernation? Answer. The host had been dormant for 10 years. 10 years? He almost yelled at the system. Answer. It is nearly difficult to preserve human awareness during hollowification, They are incompatible to an extraordinary degree. The only method to achieve an exception was to severely slow down the holofication process as the system manually led the process and merged the host's consciousness. This extended the process to 10 years. What about my parents, then? What about my younger sister? He inquired. Unknown answer. He sighed once more, knowing there was nothing he could do. He looked down and realized he was considerably taller than he remembered. It appeared like he was around 10 feet tall. When he glanced at his arms, he noticed that his forearms resembled a cross between a sword and the pincers of a stag beetle. He also had 4 legs now. That's going to take some getting used to, he thought to himself, attempting to remain optimistic about the undeniable confirmation that he wasn't human, or even somewhat human. If I recall correctly, there was a pond in this park, he thinks as he walks up to look at himself in the mirror. What he sees is no longer as unexpected. He resembles a huge bug on steroids, with a white hollow mask resembling a rhinoceros beetle head and stag beetle pincer-like arm blades. The majority of his carapace was black, with the exception of his arm blades and wing covers, which were iridescent black, green, and blue, making them rather attractive in a macabre sense. Oh, I suddenly have wings. I couldn't even be a bipedal hollow, he almost cried, realizing how far he was from anything less than absolutely horrible. So much for being handsome, but I suppose my carapace is beautiful. Arg, I'm already getting corrupted by these dreadful aesthetics. He wallowed in his sorrow, hitting the water in rage, causing quite a splash. Is a smack still a slap if you don't have a hand? Fortunately, no one was around to notice a massive splash that sprang out of nowhere. So, what now? He reflected to himself. Mission. Consume 100 animal spirits. Achievement. Skill, soul-body separation. Well, that's morbid to say the least. But I suppose it's better than not having it. But what is this about missions and skills? He was perplexed. Answer. The system features a mission subsystem that assigns tasks to the host and can award a number of prizes, including talents. If missions and talents are a thing, what about stats and status? He wondered, anxiously anticipating his moment. Answer. Yes, the system has such subsystems that allow for growth through performing missions, expending spiritual energy, or souls. Wait. Stats. Status. Status panel, he said quickly. Status board. Saito Hisashi's name, spiritual age, 49. Ethnicity. Hollow, rank, null, level, 1, express, 0, 10. Stats. Fortune. 5, 2 dexterity, section 10 of the Constitution. 5 intelligence, spirit level, 15, stat points available, 5. Passive ability. Absorption of spiritual energy. Extremely fast regeneration, acidic note, active abilities. N. A. Wow, I aged quickly. Those 10 years don't count. Make it 39, he reasoned. Negative response. So, what's the deal with this nonsense tanky build? I'm not going to put up with that. I need to address this, Naruto stated angrily when his data were shown. System. Could you give me a reference for these stats? It's kind of useless as it is, he inquired of the system. Answer. On average, a regular human would have 1 point for each stat. Does it mean I'm now super powerful? He questioned, almost enthusiastically, with a gleam in his beady bug eyes. Answer. Only in comparison to other humans or pluses. Because of the challenges encountered with holofication, Host is incredibly weak in comparison to anything else. Even a non-seated Shinigami straight out of the academy could easily wipe you off right now. For clarity, before ever unleashing his Shinigami powers, Kurosaki Ichigo possessed a spirit power of 10, which, while unlikely, would be enough to be regarded a potential harm to your current self. Meanwhile, Ishida Uryu may annihilate you in a single blow. Damn. Is there no good news to report? He inquired rhetorically. Negative response. Really? As he responded, he grew depressed. Answer. Though Host is currently extremely weak due to the hollow system, Host has no barriers to his growth. If Host continues to absorb spirit power, devour souls, and complete missions, unlike other hollows, Host is guaranteed to reach Vasto Lord or higher without any bottlenecks or dead ends in the OO progress. Unlike other spiritual creatures, Host can direct his own growth through the use of stat points earned through leveling and quests, allowing him to branch off on many paths rather than being stuck on one. Finally, the system host can complete tasks and obtain skills that are rare or even unavailable to other hollows. Finally, with the system's assistance, the conversion of spirit power and eaten souls is significantly more efficient, allowing for far faster growth than your average hollow. Well, I guess that's finally some good news, if I can survive that long, he grumbled to himself. Wait. Speaking of surviving, wasn't Aizen spying on everyone when I was attacked by White? Isn't it true that I'm completely fucked? He realized all of a sudden. Answer. The host was fortunate because, as a result of the hibernation and merger processes, the host's soul looked to have fragmented following the attack. Aizen is likely to believe that the host failed the hollowification and perished as a result. What's the big deal about hibernating for 10 years? He complained to the system. Well, Ichigo should have been born by now, so Aizen should have moved on from Naruki City to Karakura Town by now, and he shouldn't have the time to be peeping about here any longer. I can't let him notice me yet because I know he'll use me in all sorts of wacky experiments until I'm either one of his little slaves or there's nothing left to experiment on. He attempted to think optimistically. At the same time, I can't be eaten by other hollows or caught by Shinigami. With my current strength, those would be instant game overs, and I don't know if I'll make it through a third death. He was worried, trying to think of contingencies to avoid being caught as well as ones to use if he was caught. First and foremost, I can't be caught, therefore this tanky nonsense has to disappear. The system allocated all of my available stat points to dexterity, he decided on his first few steps. He'd need to survive, and there's no better way to do that than to be able to attack rapidly and run even faster, enormous bug body and all. Answer. The dexterity of the affirmative host has been increased from 5 to 7. That's more like it, he remarked as he attempted to race around the pond, only to discover that he had really become roughly 3 times as fast as before. He was fleeing like a bug from hell. He was a massive beetle the size of a car zipping across downtown at the speed of a car. It was extremely thrilling. He noticed a raccoon spirit out of the corner of his eye, but it was definitely a tanuki because it was Japan. He races over to it before it can reply, his 4 legs in overdrive, and chomps down the entire thing in one mouthful. It had no idea what had transpired until it was too late. Mission. Devour 100 animal souls at a rate of 1/100th. XP. 1/10th. I'm sorry, little boy, but it's either you or me now, and it's not going to be me. Just have to keep going. I suppose this is my new life for the time being, whether I like it or not, he soothed himself. That night, all animal spirits in this small neighborhood park were inexplicably eliminated. There's no need to thank him. Mission. Devour 100 animal spirits on a scale of 10/100ths. XP. 10 out of 10. Raise your level, plus 1 stat points available. Sweet. He exclaimed, but it sounded like a hollow roar, so he soon hushed up, terrified of drawing attention to himself. Fortunately, he was fortunate, and no one with significant spiritual strength appeared to be nearby. Okay. Pump it into dexterity, he said, pausing to consider again. Answer. The dexterity of the affirmative host has been increased from 1 to 8. When he glanced at himself in the pond again, he noticed that he had grown slightly more streamlined, though not significantly. I guess it's still a beetle after all. But you can now call me Volkswagen. He laughed at his own stupid joke. Oh, his little sister would have given him a sympathetic laugh. This notion rapidly dimmed his lightheartedness. Mito. I've been a failure of a brother, he said. He shakes his head as he looks at his reflection in the water again. Okay. This park has been completely depleted, and it's not like larger animals are continuously dying in the park. It will be some time before the grocery shop is restocked. What should I do now? He questioned himself. I guess I'll walk around the neighborhood and look for my old residence. Perhaps my family is still there, he reasoned. Even when he was a human, it didn't take long to travel to his residence because it was within walking distance. On the way, he came across some pluses who hurriedly hid from him, some even cowering in a corner at the sight of him, but he ignored them. Eating them felt wrong for some reason. He understood that eating the animal would taste like spirit power and that the more of it he ate, the tastier it became. But something about eating something with a human mentality and shape was still very troubling to him. So he just left them alone for the time being, leaving some very perplexed pluses in his wake. It was a little tricky navigating the city without upsetting anything, but his newly improved dexterity came in handy. When he arrived to the house, it appeared exactly as he remembered it. The paint had faded slightly, but everything else appeared to be the same. The car parked in front of the house, on the other hand, was unique. I suppose it's been 10 years after all. I'm curious if they still live here. I can't say I blame them. Though I didn't stay long after the attack. I'm sure the situation was as horrible as any normal Japanese citizen might imagine. Though I doubt it was much better than my first. I'm very sure the tiger kept mauling me, unlike White, he thought as he approached the living room window. When he entered the living room, he was both relieved and heartbroken because the most visible item there was a new black shrine with a picture of his old self and some incense burning in his honor. It was new to him, and the shrine was clearly revealing its age, since the black lacquer had faded here and there. It was extremely bizarre. It was still early in the morning, so it had probably only recently been lit. At the very least, they didn't move, he thought to himself. But he hadn't seen any of his family members yet. It wasn't until a little later that a girl a little older than he had been when he died stepped up to the shrine and strangely stared at his photo, giving a prayer. She'd changed a lot since the last time he saw her, when she was just a tiny child. Her hair had grown, her features had developed, and she was now a young woman. She must be 18 years old now. He wished he could reach out to her, but all he had were these accursed blades, and even if he did have hands, his touch as a hollow would be poison to her. He wanted to cry, but this shape wouldn't even allow him to do so because his eyes couldn't cry. Thus the only thing that could cry was his soul as he watched her, knowing she couldn't even see him, and if she could, all she'd see was a monster to flee from. His mother began making breakfast shortly after his parents arrived downstairs, while his sister arranged the table. His parents also appeared to be much older. Time had not been kind to me. He was certain that his loss had not been good to him. He observed his mother still looked at his photo at the shrine on a regular basis. But there was nothing he could do, no matter how badly he wanted to tell them he was well. Okay, sort of. His father was somewhat reserved, but he had always been that way, so it was difficult to tell, but before leaving for work, he kneeled in front of the shrine and said a serious prayer as well, despite his lack of emotion on the surface. Shortly after his father left, his sister grabbed a bag and walked to what he assumed was either high school or college. He had no idea because he hadn't been there for her. He collapsed lifelessly on the ground in a catatonic state because he couldn't take it any longer. The one thought that kept going through his head was, why? Everything had been on schedule, and everything was going swimmingly. Why couldn't he just get a break this time? Thankfully, no one would be able to see him, so he didn't have to worry about others seeing him. He finally got up and departed after seeing his mother clean up the house and wash laundry for a while. If I can get to Ijuka's, I might not be as terrible, says Vasto Lord, who unlocks a far more human form. I need to get there as fast as possible without catching Aizen's attention. Do I need Aizen and the H-Goku to become an Arankar after becoming a Vasto Lord? He inquired. Answer. No, as long as the host becomes a Vasto Lord and gathers enough spirit power, the system will be able to employ these to defend the host once they remove their mask and transition into the Arankar form. Good, then I have my aim and I need to do it fast. I can't leave them hanging, he told himself, firming his resolve. How much XP do I need to level up? He inquired. XP, 0/30. Good. I should be able to level up at least 1 or 2 more times just by completing the current mission, he said to himself, feeling a little better now that he had a clear goal and at least a road for the next step. 10 years in hibernation with no one to talk to except the system. He waits for Rikichi to get some distance before emerging from behind the building and heading farther into the park. It's a good thing average people can't see him because otherwise, no matter how carefully he moves, there's no escaping the 10-foot insect if you can see it. He discovers a burrow of amami rabbits that had died. Damn, these things are pretty ugly for rabbits. Aren't rabbits meant to be cute? But I'll take anything I can get, and there's a lot of them here, he thought. He also discovered some Sika deer, which added to his total. Mission. 100 animal spirits 100 100ths mission finished. The ability soul body separation is granted, XP, 60/60ths. Raise your level. +1 stat points available. Yes, he encouraged himself. Add the point to dexterity, he reminded himself. Answer. The dexterity of the affirmative host has been increased from 1 to 10. So, where is the next mission? He asks, frowning. Answer. Completing a quest does not always result in the unlocking of a new mission. Missions are assigned based on availability and the host situation. The system suggests making consistent progress leveling until a new quest becomes available. Well, that's something. Can't complain too much about the assistance I'm getting, he reasoned. He hunted the remaining animal spirits in the park until none remained. From then on, he would make a point of patrolling the parks on a daily basis to catch any new spirits that appeared before other Hollow ate them, hollowified them, or just vanished. While doing this, he made it a point to visit his family's home every morning and take his sister to school while telling her about his day. She couldn't hear or see him, but chatting to her made him feel a little more human than his lonely life of nothing but patrolling and hunting animal spirits had made him feel. Perhaps it's similar to how talking to the grave of a deceased friend or family member makes them feel better. It's paradoxical that he is the deceased to the living who can't hear him in this scenario. It's really bittersweet, yet he never misses a day. Alright, show me your status panel system, he said. Status board. Saito Hisashi's name, spiritual age, 49. Ethnicity. Hollow, rank, null, level, 6, XP, 128, 210. Stats. Fortune. 5, 12 Dexterity, Section 10 of the Constitution. 5 Intelligence, Spirit level, 39, Stat points available, 0. Passive ability. Absorption of spiritual energy. Extremely fast regeneration, acidic note, active abilities. Separation of soul and body. He maintained investing his free points towards dexterity because he still had no way to stay safe other than being able to flee swiftly when needed, and he was still as slow as a snail compared to Shunpo or Sonito. Meanwhile, it appeared that his spirit power gradually increased even without leveling up, merely by passively absorption of his spiritual energy absorption talent, adding around 1 point per day with little effort. He guessed it would be faster if not for the scarcity of spirit energy in Naruki City and, most likely, the rest of Earth in comparison to Soul Society and Hueco Mundo. He asked the system to explain soul-body separation. Answer. The host can utilize spirit power to code a section of his body, which can push the soul from a physical or artificial body. I'm not sure how useful it will be, but I guess I'll take what I can get for the time being, he sighs before shutting the status panel. For the most part, the previous several weeks had been relatively routine. Bullying the weak and hiding from the strong, as usual. Are we certain that this isn't a Chinese novel? He was on his routine afternoon patrol when he heard a highly obnoxious alarm sound that he had never heard before. Emergency mission. Reina's protection, reward, concealment of spirit power. What? Internally, he yelled. He ran towards his house before he could even think twice, but no one was there. He knew the route his sister used when walking to and from school, and it was around this time that she would normally be leaving. He hastily retraced the path to school, hoping to arrive in time to prevent anything from happening. It only took him a few minutes to get halfway down the road because he was now capable of moving at motorway rates despite his lack of specialized mobility talents thus far. He had just turned the corner when he noticed a frivolous rich kid with 4 lackeys dragging his sister into an abandoned alley in the distance. He hurried down the alleyway after them, his mind blank. When he arrived, the lackeys had surrounded her as the rich kid tried to pull down her skirt, and she was crying as she tried to push them away as best she could, but it was hopeless with 5 males surrounding her. He was scarcely aware of what he was doing as he let out a massive hollow roar powerful enough to shake the ground. Everyone, even his sister, stumbled over, unable to keep their balance. He was furious. He needed to show them absolute dread, not just death. With minimal thought, he slammed his weak blades away from his sister and into the wall. But it wasn't enough. He was invisible to them. Suddenly, he had a notion, and slowly, spirit power began to coat his blades, intensifying the iridescent look and making them appear to sparkle. Then he slammed them into them again, but this time their souls separated from their bodies and slammed into the wall while their bodies remained slumped like a puppet that had lost its strings, the only thing indicating they were still alive their slowly rising and falling chests. "What the hell is that monster?" exclaimed one of the lackeys. Shit, 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 just protect me, "I'll call the cops," the rich boy said confidently, ready to abandon the lackeys to slow down the beast that emerged out of nowhere. They were so afraid that they didn't notice their corporeal bodies sprawled on the ground, bound to them by the chain of fate. But the lackeys weren't buying it. Hisashi wasn't some type of large animal. He was a true monster, the stuff of nightmares. This was not normal, and the police were not going to solve it. They all started running at the same time, leaving just the fittest to survive. This infuriated Hisashi even more, and he let out another thunderous hollow roar that turned their legs to jelly as they fought to crawl out of the alley. Hisashi examined the chain of fate before inserting his blades between the chain links and slowly dragging the first victim back towards him. The others hadn't even noticed, but the victim was screaming bloody murder as he approached the monstrosity. When he got within arm's reach of Hisashi, his face was full with snot and tears, and if he could urinate himself in soul form, he would have. Hisashi's mask suddenly parted between his lower and upper jaws, displaying a row of razor-sharp teeth. He gripped the lackey with the dull inside of the blade arms like a pincer, dragging him up to his lips and chomping down without a second thought, eating the entire soul. +50, X, P, XP, 247, 450, +1 spirit strength, spirit level, 47. He was so angry that he didn't see the notifications. The entire event happened so quickly that the others hadn't even reached the end of the alley when he began pulling the one furthest away towards him. As the one who had made it the furthest of them all was slowly pulled back past them towards the jaws of hell, the others looked as if they had seen death itself. The second one lasted hardly longer than the first. They were all trash, much like their behavior. He had finished the third by the time the first reached the end of the alley. Before the fourth lackey could say anything, he was dragged from the brilliant street lighted by the orange setting sun back into the dark alleyway towards certain death, squealing like a dying pig, leaving only the rich child leading this little gang. Hisashi had saved the worst for last. Nothing can bring out pure dread like a sprinkling of hope, and that was exactly what he had given him by allowing him to reach the street. +50, X, P extension 3, XP, 397 450ths, +1 spirit power multiplied by 3. Spirit level. 50. The rich child started going up to everyone, but despite his loud calling for attention, they disregarded him as if he didn't exist. He quickly gave up trying to attract the attention of anyone ready to provide it by moving further up the street to other people. He eventually spotted a patrolman from the local neighborhood police station. Just as he thought he was saved and was about to run up to him, his chain of fate snapped, preventing him from going any further, and a moment later he was being dragged back to the alley, kicking and screaming at the top of his lungs, trying to grab hold of anything he could, but no one was looking at him and he wasn't strong enough to resist the pull of the chain. Unlike the lackeys, Hisashi made sure to take him back gently. By this point, the affluent boy was hyperventilating and in a deadly posture as he was pulled the last bit, finally giving up resistance. Oh, it appears his mind snapped. How? Good. He thought before swallowing the last one. +70, X, P, XP, 450, 450. Raise your level, +1 bonus stat point. XP. 17,550ths, spirit power +2, spirit level, 52. Emergency mission successful, spirit power concealment skill awarded. Hisashi turned around to face Reina, who was still shaking in horror on the ground behind him. Happily, he had managed to protect her from both the attackers and himself. Meanwhile, Reina had spotted a shimmering outline of him. Because he spent so much time near her, his increased spirit power had stimulated hers, and now that she had experienced an extreme fear of death, she had acquired a very weak form of spiritual sight, allowing her to see only a fraction of the spiritual world, which was scaring her even more. Hisashi took a step towards her, but she recoiled in terror, tears flowing down her cheeks, and began crawling backwards in despair when he advanced towards her. Finally, her back contacted the wall, preventing her from sliding any further away. For a brief period, his heart halted, causing him to pause. Reina, he said gently, but it barely sounded like what he was attempting to say because his present shape was nothing like human and significantly greater in size, producing a very low bass sound instead. It would have been difficult to remember her name if she hadn't been scared out of her wits. Despite his pain, he turned around and vanished at the fastest speed he could muster, leaving her alone, The only thing to remind her that this wasn't just a terrifying hallucination, the 5 slumped bodies that were no longer breathing now that Hisashi had consumed their souls. It took him a long time to cool down after fleeing halfway across town and falling down in another quiet alley to hide himself. What happened, system? I was hardly in command there, he admitted. Answer. Despite the system's best efforts, the host will continue to experience hunger for souls and enhanced sensitivity to unpleasant emotions such as rage, grief, desire, and so on. To minimize such influence, the system recommends that the host remain aware of their emotional state. No, though it's a little frightening, I wouldn't be able to exist as a hollow if I maintained a wholly human mindset. All I have to do now is stay more in control if this happens again. It is not always possible to totally prevent it. Thank you for explaining. He thinks as he recalls how he was before his change and what will be required if he wants to survive and prosper as a hollow long enough to rejoin with his family. Worse yet, I terrified my sister. How could that have happened? He is concerned. Working out probability. Answer. The highest chance is that the host's spirit power was aroused as a result of her higher spirit power and regular interaction and closeness. It hasn't been enough to awaken spiritual abilities on its own, but the events of today have sparked something. Hisashi sighs, unsure if this is a good or terrible thing. I'm not certain. If her spirit force grows as a result of my influence, I must defend her, as this makes her a more attractive target for hollows. Another reason I need to get stronger. If I don't, I'll be liable for much more danger than she would have been if I hadn't survived at all. Now that I think about it, I received a ridiculous amount of XP there. I received more in a few minutes than I typically get in a day, he thought. Answer. Animals have little spiritual strength, and their souls fade swiftly. When transformed, they supply only a small quantity of spirit power when compared to human souls. Human souls differ from hollow or Shinigami souls in a similar way. However, the variation in the latter two is significantly greater than in human souls. I guess that rich child did give a little bit more than the other 4 did. I suppose he wasn't as much a waste as the others. I don't regret what I did, but I can't begin abusing innocent people or their souls. System, are I powerful enough to begin confronting other hollows? He inquires. Answer. Not recommended, though the host is now powerful enough to combat the weaker hollow. If the host encounters a stronger specimen, harm and death are very possible. All well, I'll keep it in mind. I need to get stronger faster, and the growth is actually slowing down when I only use animal spirits, he says pensively. He can't keep taking the safe but exceedingly slow path indefinitely. What was the new talent I received as a mission reward? He wonders, remembering how he completed the mission. He hadn't even considered it because the task and prize were secondary to his sister's safety. Answer. Spirit power concealment allows the user to entirely eliminate the passively emitted spirit power. It'd be similar to stealth from any spirit power detection ability or technology. Isn't it exactly what I need to avoid getting captured by Hollow or Shinigami? He was taken aback. Answer. Correct, albeit the host is still visible to those with high spirit strength. Despite the fact that the system utilized stealth as an example, this is not a true stealth skill. To attain true stealth, host would need to learn some form of camouflage skill in addition to spirit power concealment. No, this is already a significant improvement. It will help me to escape being hunted by Hollow and Shinigami while also allowing me to hunt other Hollow and land a sneak attack on them, considerably improving my chances of success compared to before. Though I've handled the speed problem, this large physique is still a headache in that regard, and this talent will assist a lot in neutralizing some of that. He retorts to the system. Alright. Now it's time to get back to hunting, but now that I'm on patrol, if I come across what appears to be a weaker Hollow, I won't try everything I can to avoid it, but I will consider engaging it if I'm in a better position, he decides. Naruto was resting in an abandoned structure near his family's home, trying to put his thoughts together after the events of the day. It is never a smart idea to fly by the seat of your trousers, especially when deceitful scumbags like Aizen are lurking about. Now that I've finished the first tasks and gained some power, at least enough to not be the absolute weakest of the lot, I need to start actually planning for the future, he reasoned. Alright. Let's start with what I know. I got caught up in the White Incident, which I know happened roughly 20 years before the events of Bleach. Then I hibernated, so we should be a little less than 10 years before the beginning events, he added, attempting to piece together a rough timeline based on what he recalled from his prior existence and what had happened to him thus far. Now, if we're 10 years ahead of schedule, what's happening on now? Isshin and Masaki should have gone to Karakura town. Ichigo and his friends should have all arrived by now. At this point, Aizen should be continuing his research and moving his focus to Karakura town. I can interfere, but I must exercise extreme caution. The more I tamper with the events, and the earlier I do so, the wider the ripple effects will be, making it nearly difficult to predict how the original plot will change. Although I don't want to be a slave to the original chronology, I am still weak, and the less I know about what is going to happen, the more likely it is that I will be fucked in some way, most likely by Aizen. Unlike him, I cannot constantly monitor everything and everyone. I'm essentially flying blind, and my only advantage is my system and my knowledge of the original chronology. He tries to recall as much as he can about the important characters' activities at this point in the past. As for Soul Society, everyone is currently wrapped around Aizen's fingers and has no idea what is going on. I guess I can almost completely overlook their involvement, at least until the main events begin. He nodded to himself, relieved that he could chop a large chunk out of the image and not have to worry about it for the foreseeable future. The single most crucial thing, at least in broad strokes, is for Ichigo to become a substitute Shinigami. If it doesn't happen, the entire time frame is thrown out the window, and I'll have nothing to work with. Masaki must die, and I must allow Fishbone D to find Ichigo and attack his family. Ichigo, please accept my apologies, but, if the decision is between you suffering and me and my family, it's not a difficult choice. But do the events have to take place in the same order? I do feel awful for not doing anything for them. He thinks about what he can do to modify the timeline without breaking it. I can save Masaki, but she must vanish at the same time Grand Fisher kills her so Ichigo can become the emo boy he was meant to be and be influenced to strengthen his spirit power to see ghosts and attract Fishbone D. To do this he must both see his mom get killed by a hollow and be touched by a hollow's spirit power to ensure the events remain roughly the same. She dies about 6 years before the events of episode 1, so I can go to Karakura around that time and keep an eye on her. Find out when Fishbone D starts stalking her, then swallow Fishbone shortly before the occurrence. To keep the timeline intact, I'll have to play out Masaki's murder and kidnap her so she can't alter the timeline any further, at least until Ichigo becomes a substitute Shinigami. I'll be able to be a little more free if Aizen completely abandons Soul Society and moves to Las Noches. At that point, I should be considerably stronger, and the schedule should be fairly defined without producing too much variation. He goes over the numerous permutations that his adjustments could have before deciding that it is truly a workable plan. Ichigo may hate my guts once that happens, but if given the choice between the trauma of believing his mother died for 6 to 7 years and his mother actually dying, he would take the first. So don't blame me, but that's all I can risk changing for you, he ultimately decides. Now that I've ensured that the events that led to Kurosaki going to Soul Society were successful, I'll need a way to travel to Hueco Mundo and the ability to survive there so I can be ready and powerful enough to keep an eye on Aizen once he retrieves the H-Goku and begins creating artificial Arrancar. At that moment, I need to be at least an Ejukas, preferably a Vasto Lord. To fast turn into a Jillian, I'll need to either eat enough hollow on Earth to evolve or be powerful enough to swallow hundreds of hollow soon after going to Hueco Mundo there before hunting other Jillian till I can evolve into an Ejukas. Is this even a possibility? But I can't risk turning into Jillian on Earth. Even with my spirit power concealment skill, the Shinigami will not be able to ignore a big-ass Jillian strolling around on Earth for long, and even a lieutenant would be enough to kill me even as a Jillian. Any suggestions for the system? He inquired. Calculating. Answer. The system is capable of suppressing the host's transformation into Jillian, letting the host to consume enough or too many hollow souls to initiate the evolution at will after. Alright, it makes the plan much more viable. There would be no way to leave for Hueco Mundo once Ichigo leaves Soul Society, then consumes enough hollows to become a Jillian, then consumes enough Jillian to become at least an Ejukas, all before Aizen leaves Soul Society and succeeds in testing and producing Arrancar. Even with the system and all of its benefits, the timeline for such rapid growth is simply too short. If I can exceed the requirement for becoming a Jillian, Then wait until he goes for Soul Society. Then swiftly turn into an above-average Jillian with the surplus spirit power and go on a Jillian-eating rampage in the Forest of Manos. I might just make it in time. This would be so much easier if I didn't have to factor Aizen into everything I planned. As much as I enjoyed Bleach as a kid, I wish it was a program where all the villains were as stupid as Grimmjow and only cared about fighting and murdering instead of scheming. It would make my life so much easier. Where did my cushy life as Bill Gates' replacement as a computer expert go? Oh, and Aizen's experiments were also to blame. You asshole, he sneered. At least I have a general idea of what I'll be focused on for the next 10 years, he groans. Prognostat, that's a lot of Naruto talking to himself, but I don't want him to be a dumb protagonist, and only a dumb protagonist would go in without serious planning. Looks at Ichigo, so I hope a whole chapter of the main character reflecting without fighting or interpersonal relationships wasn't too boring. Naruto is hanging from the side of a building as he stalks a hollow he has been watching since he sensed it earlier today. He feels fairly certain he is stronger, but he isn't willing to take any risks on his potentially first fight with a hollow. Making sure to both stay out of its line of sight and running his spirit power concealment, he has managed to track it down and stalk it without being caught for the last hour, and it just seems to have set its mind on plus that must have looked particularly appetizing to it. The closest thing to compare the hollow to would be an overgrown rat-like creature with elongated limbs and a hollow mask running over most of its snout and skull. Though it was very big compared to an actual rat, it was still dwarfed by Hisashi's size, as it was only reached around 5 to 6 feet tall. What it lacked in size and in turn likely strength it more than made up for with its burst speed being almost as fast as Hisashi's regular speed, despite him religiously pumping his free stat points into his dexterity. Leaping from building to building as quietly as he can, he keeps tracking the hollow, watching it like a hawk as it chases the plus through the streets until it finally manages to back it into a corner. He crouches, tensing his legs in preparation to pounce, and notices the hollow, letting down its guard a little as it knows it has finally cornered its prey with no way out. The hollow seemed to notice something and, at the last moment, dodged to the side as fast as it could, avoiding being beheaded but still losing one of its hind legs that was just too slow to get away from the slash. The ground shook and the pavement cracked where it had been a moment ago, now revealing Hisashi with its missing leg pierced on the end of one of his blades before popping in his mouth like a small snack. It only takes a few moments for the rat hollow's high-speed regeneration to kick in, and the leg begins to regenerate at a speed fast enough to see with the naked eye. Hisashi isn't going to give it a chance now that it can't use the majority of its speed, which heavily relies on its hind legs, but he has to finish this before it manages to regrow it and regain its lost mobility. He spins around and launches himself at the rat hollow again, his right arm slashing at it. The rat dodges to right but fails to realize it's a feint in time, and Naruto manages to chomp a big piece of its mask off. This immediately causes the rat hollow to drop and struggle to even maintain its life. It's obviously dying. Unlike a missing limb, a heavily damaged mask isn't something it can recover from. Hisaki doesn't have time for this, as every second, more of the rat hollow's spirit body is dispersing, losing him his precious spirit power. At this point, it is completely incapable of resisting as he devours the rest of it in seconds. Plus 500 XP, 517, 550, spirit power plus 10, spirit level, 62. Holy sh*t. Naruto was astounded by the figures he was seeing. Isn't this a bit much in comparison to human souls? He inquired of the system. Answer. Hollow souls are most optimal for devouring because conversion of the spirit power has the highest efficiency. Even though the amount of spirit power contained by this hollow isn't 10 times that of the humans you devoured previously, due to the compatibility in devouring hollow spirit power, much more of the spirit power is retained after converting the spirit power you devour from a hollow. I guess deciding to switch from animal souls to hollow was the right decision. Pluses might be safer, but although I can stomach devouring people that I absolutely know are bad, like those that attacked Reina, I don't feel comfortable attacking regular pluses while knowing they are likely just innocent people. I could go to prison to devour people there, but honestly, with Japan's conviction rate, I really don't feel comfortable judging that the people incarcerated are guilty of what they have been sentenced for with any certainty. The risk in this attack was controlled and manageable. There was barely a chance of me to be harmed, and the reward was immense. If I continue, My strength should grow far faster than it has been munching on animal spirits. Finally, there is little to no guilt when eating basic hollow. Though Ijukas and beyond regain some semblance of consciousness beyond their baser instincts, this isn't really the case before that point. The closest was Orihime's brother, and really, he had barely transformed and was actively losing his mind to the point where he ended up harming his sister in the end anyway. By that standard, there is no need to feel guilt over devouring what are, in essence, mindless beasts with little consciousness controlled by their base desire to consume, which only end up harming innocent people. He justifies to himself that it's no different than killing a dangerous predatory animal that's terrorizing the city, and doing so also happens to help him towards his goals. He is pretty much being a good Samaritan. When he turns away, he leaves behind a terrified and perplexed plus, puzzled why it is still alive after colliding with not one but two powerful monsters, its senses screaming at it that they were its natural predators and that it would die the instant it collided with them. It took a few days for Naruto to even consider approaching his family again, but he couldn't just stay away because that would hurt him even more than not being able to communicate with them, so he began visiting the house again and after, eventually walking his sister to school again, though this time keeping a greater distance, hoping she wouldn't notice with her weak spiritual perception. Unlike his hopes, Mito did notice shortly after he started coming by again. At first, she was terrified, considered hiding it, and was even concerned that she was going insane, but the aftermath of the guys who were sexually harassing was very clear, so there was no doubt something happened. The authorities eventually deemed it as a heart attack, suspecting that because the 5 victims were all connected and died in a relatively short time frame, they were all victims of a heart attack. However, it is difficult not to notice a giant blur repeatedly appearing near your house and around you, so she decided for the time being to just pretend she couldn't see it and see how things went before making any big moves. At first, she was terrified whenever she noticed the blur, but as time passed and it didn't seem to do anything, she calmed down a lot, though she remained quite cautious. This continued on for a few weeks until she noticed that the fuzz became sharper with time. She had also seen that it would follow her to school before leaving her alone during the day. It looked completely uninterested in being with her during the school day, and it wasn't always around after school. It seemed to be most noticeable around her house and on her way to school. But why wasn't it doing anything else? Now that it's clearer, it doesn't appear like a human at all, but it acts like one. Is there a ghost stalking me? She began to wonder if she was genuinely losing her marbles because none of this made any sense. She also observed that it was generating some kind of noise while she was walking to school on a regular basis. At first, she couldn't make out the sound, but as the weeks passed, it became clearer, but she couldn't tell what it was making. Is it talking to me? She pondered, perplexed. She was initially unsure, then. The strangest thing was that, despite the fact that the creature was getting more visible and appeared to be stalking her, which should have made her more afraid. Strangely, she had the impression that she was familiar with this monster. It was a little like running into an old classmate on the street or in the supermarket after not seeing them in years. There is no immediate recognition, only a familiar feeling that you should know them but can't figure out why. Even as time passed, she couldn't figure it out. Alright, it's evident enough that it's something anyone would call a monster. It resembles a bug, but it is so large that it would not even fit in my bedroom. But why does it feel like I should know? I'm quite sure I've never met a huge bug before. Is it the ghost of a normal bug that became enormous after dying? But I've never maintained or been around bugs. If it hadn't been following me for months, I'd suppose it was stalking me to devour me, but I can't imagine it hasn't had plenty of chances. She was beginning to wonder if she wasn't going insane because the changes and improvements seemed to be slow but consistent, and she assumed that if she was truly losing it, the changes would be more erratic and less consistent. Because of the familiar sensation, she decided to pay closer attention to it, listen to it, and ask it if it talked to her. At first, it just sounded like some bassy mumbling from the depths of hell, but as time passed, it began to clarify up and sound more like a demon speaking rather than hell itself. She couldn't fully get it yet, but I believed that if it continued to improve, she would be able to grasp it someday. Meanwhile, Naruto was spending every moment he wasn't with his family hunting hollow or animal souls, which had resulted in an increase in his stats and spirit strength. But he was yearning for more missions. Stats are good, but you must have the abilities to use them effectively. Consider the concept of speed. Sure, you can be fast, But without acquiring a talent like Shunpo or Sonito, you will never catch up just on stats because the skills work as a multiplier to the stat. You could, theoretically, but it would take a long time to train him to outrun even a mediocre Shinigami's Shunpo, let alone monsters like Byakuya or, worse, Yoruichi. System status panel, he said. Status board. Saito Hisashi's name, spiritual age, 49, ethnicity, hollow. Rank. Null, level, 10 to 34, XP, 2183 4960. Stats. Power. 5 to 19, dexterity level, 16 to 30. Structure. 10 to 15, intelligence level, 5 to 6. Power of Spirit. 63 to 1391, stat points available, 0. Passive ability. Absorption of spiritual energy. Extremely fast regeneration, acidic note, active abilities. Separation of soul and body, spirit power hiding. He'd added a point to intelligence to see what difference it made, and it seemed that the main difference was how well he could regulate spirit power and his talents. It's absolutely beneficial, but it'll be much more useful if he has more spirit power and skills to use, so it's been put on the back burner for the time being. There also appeared to be a slew of minor benefits, such as marginally improved learning speed, memory, mathematical ability, and reaction time. In general, a slew of things that are either entirely or partially related to his brain. Although positive things to boost the bonus were obvious, they weren't enough to encourage him to invest solely on those until the broader benefits to spirit power and skill utilization got significant enough. For the time being, he required power and speed, and improving his physical attributes looked to be the quickest way to ensure he could completely handle the Grand Fisher situation. Prognostat stealth time travel. Approximately 6 months have elapsed since the beginning of this chapter, resulting in a significant increase in the statistics. It's also been about 9 months since he returned. To be continued.
That's it for this part, guys. Thanks for listening to this video. I hope you did enjoy this part of the story, and if you did, like, share, and subscribe for more. And thank you all for help and support, and have a great day.